magnificent museum, natural history. My name is Patrick Rosen. I'm the operational director here, and I'm a representative here. And our general director who wasn't able to join us tonight. But it's my pleasure to welcome you here, and I hope you enjoy the evening as it is, and certainly have a look at what we have, and maybe visit us again if you have some time to spend in the museum. It's really worthwhile. So I'm not going to talk too long. I'm going to give priority to the event as such. Yes?
Can you speak a bit louder?
Still louder? Okay. Or closer to the microphone, I guess. Okay. So, for the most important thing, I'm going to keep it very short and give priority to the event. So, in case of emergency, and I don't think we'll have one, but you never know, you will hear an alarm, and then you will see the exits clearly indicated on the walls. There will be emergency lighting and such, and basically you follow the exits out. So, in case of a fire alarm, please do so. The toilets are back in the central hall with the staircase, and they're also clearly indicated if you need them later on, and that's it. If you have any questions now, don't hesitate to ask. If not, I will give the floor to the organizers. Thank you very much.
So, dear guests, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all this evening on behalf of the three hosting organisations. So my name is Janice Weatherly Singh, and I work for WCS, the Wildlife Conservation Society, and we've been really pleased to partner with TNC, the Nature Conservancy, and also the Belgian Biodiversity Platform. And I would also like to thank the UK government, and we're very pleased that their Deputy Ambassador is with us this evening, for supporting our work and supporting this event through the FGNC grant programme. So just a short note about the format. We have two illustrious speakers who we're really looking forward to hearing from to start the event. And then we will move to a structured panel discussion with our high-level panellists, which will be moderated by my colleague Noor from TNC. And then we will plan to keep it fairly short so that we can use most of the evening for networking and enjoying a drink together. So I would be really happy now to introduce our first speaker, Her Excellency Eilish Campbell from the Canadian mission to the EU. So thank you for joining us. We're very happy that you can be here. And as a host nation together with China of the upcoming COP, we're really looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, bonsoir. You can hear me okay in the back? We're good? Great. First of all, a huge thanks to the organizers. Your organizations are very well known in Canada, and it's been my pleasure to get to know you better and your work here in Europe, also in Africa, and of course around the world. Le Canada se réjouit d'accueillir le monde entier à Montréal en décembre en ce moment critique. In a context where climate change and biodiversity loss are intrinsically linked, the importance of concerted and rigorous actions to avoid catastrophic impacts on nature cannot be overstated. With over 1 million species at risk of extinction, I think we all know that what we're doing is urgent and frankly more important than ever. As Canada's Minister for the Environment and Climate Change, the Honourable Stéphane Guilbeault stated at Climate COP27 last week, coming off, of course, an important COP26 in the United Kingdom, climate and nature are two sides of the same coin. To this end, Minister Guilbeault was actively engaged in a number of high-profile events in Egypt, dealing with nature and biodiversity. And this included a Canadian co-hosted ministerial meeting, which was attended by representatives from over 25 countries, and we're delighted that the EU was able to join us there. At COP15, we must come together to agree on an ambitious post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that places biodiversity action, and the emphasis is on the action, not just words, on an equal footing with climate action in order to drive countries to take bold society-wide actions and policy decisions. In Montreal, we hope that all parties will agree on a framework that has several elements. First, halt and reverse the loss of nature and biodiversity by 2030 and achieve its full recovery by 2050. Second, address the key drivers of global biodiversity loss, land and sea use change, over-exploitation of nature. Here, I can't resist also making a side note on addressing corruption that leads to the over-exploitation of nature, climate change, invasive alien species, and of course, pollution of all kinds. Third, set a global target of conserving 30% of the world's lands and oceans by 2030. Fourth, recognizing the link between biodiversity loss and climate change and the need to jointly tackle these twin crises, including through the use of nature-based solutions, where, of course, our hosts tonight have been absolute world leaders in presenting policy ideas, well-costed, well-thought-out to leaders. And finally, and in addition, mobilize resources to support developing countries with implementation of the framework that are reasonable, commensurate with the level of ambition, and take into consideration the scale of financial needs based on clear evidence. I might note it's not in my talking points, but I can't resist adding, of course, a sixth principle, which is to include and put at the forefront of all of our decision-making Indigenous people in each and every one of our communities. They know the land best. Their traditional knowledge has long been ignored and now needs to be brought to the forefront of our policy decisions. We have no excuses. We can't say we didn't know. We can't say we didn't know who to talk to. We can't say we didn't know who to partner. And we certainly can't say that we're short of funds or financing for something that is literally existential. So in order to achieve these goals, let's work together. That's what tonight is all about. Hopefully we'll make new partners, and I hope each and every one of you comes away with at least 3 new connections. My incredible team, Gizem and Megan, are here. I'll be around for a little while and then going to a blended finance meeting, so rest assured as I make my exit, it's not for some ambassadorial engagement where I'm not going to be earning my keep. My dad always asks, what did you do today? Did you earn your crust today, kid? And so rest assured I'll be moving on from this event to another one on blended financing, including for nature protection in Africa. We count on all of you to continue to help us address concerns, which we know are inevitable. We've just come out of, I think, a very difficult, challenging, but yet rewarding COP27 process. We know that there will be challenges on the text for the CBD conference, and we need to listen closely to all of you when we're on the ground together. So again, use tonight to make the connections that will help us reach a successful conclusion when we're all in Montreal together. We will also need the mobilization of the private sector, financial institutions, NGOs, and the philanthropic community. Halting and reversing biodiversity loss requires real collaboration and partnerships, as well as transformational change. Canada is proud to be taking a leadership role in putting biodiversity commitments into practice. Canada has committed 25% conservation of our land and marine areas by 2025 and 30% by 2030. And just to put that in perspective, that would be like all of Sweden, Finland, Germany, and most of France in terrestrial protection areas. So it's a vast area. Canada preserves also and protects a large amount of the world's remaining northern and Arctic wilderness, and we have the longest coastline in the world. We've also committed to using nature-based climate solutions, including the planting of 2 billion trees across Canada within the next 10 years. Just to, again, put this in perspective, I asked my son, who's 13, who's going to be carrying on this work for us, to pull some stats for me. He reminded me that there's approximately 400 people per square kilometer here in Belgium. There is the equivalent of 4 in Canada per square kilometer. So from countries that continue to have, I think, great resources to protect, much will be expected. And Canada is ready to do its fair share, and I certainly know for sure that you'll see the Canadian government do more than its fair share. But now it's important to help all, including developing countries, reach the appropriate set-asides, legislation, technical knowledge, innovation, and empowerment of all peoples, including Indigenous people, in order to make this a reality. Le monde entier suivra le résultat de notre discussion à Montréal en décembre. Current and future generations expect us to act on their behalf, and we have now before us a valuable window of opportunity to change the course of events. C'est une occasion que nous ne pouvons pas nous permettre de manquer. Canada looks forward to welcoming all of you in Montreal and working together for an ambitious outcome. I look forward to meeting some of you later, and I want to thank again our hosts for having this important discussion tonight. Thanks.
So thank you very much indeed for opening the event and for those inspiring words. And I should also thank you for stepping up and giving the opening. We had hoped that Minister Katabi would be here from the Belgian government, but she's travelling back today from the climate COP and unfortunately couldn't be here. So thank you so much. And I'm very pleased now to introduce our second opening speaker, Director General of DG Environment of the European Commission, Frederica Fink-Butcher. Thank you so much.
Thank you first of all to the three hosting organizations for having us, but also for the museum and the director, because I do remember, and I just said it, like last year we had Glasgow, and I think some of you had seen I think it was called Frankie the Dinosaur, and you know, this very, very impressive video of saying what is at stake, and that is extinction, and therefore, of course, for extinction, always dinosaurs are the sort of illustration, and so I think it's a very fitting venue, so thank you for having us here. And when those, and I know some of you also come from Sharm el-Sheikh, so I cannot not say that yes, the Loss and Damage Fund is extremely exciting, probably long overdue, and they're very happy to also contribute to it and will work on the pathway to it, because it was just, let's say, the decision to have it. But I can also not hide as EU a certain disappointment, because 1.5 was not in the end document in the end, and I must say I'm very proud that the EU was pushing very hard for having it to come back and not to go beyond or lower than what was in Glasgow. What I take as representing DG Environment and therefore biodiversity and being engaged next month in the Biodiversity COP in Montreal is basically a resolve to even more than put, you know, our best foot forward to preserve nature. Because as climate change summit was not necessarily allowing to make progress, especially not on, you know, fossil fuels and on gas. What it means is nature is the one that will be the buffer. And if nature is not intact and not healthy, and we know it already today, without the type of nature that we still have, fortunately, on the planet, we will have reached already tipping points. So I think it is extremely important now to put all our energy, all our ambition into Montreal. And we are really very much looking forward, because we do only have that decade, and I'm not sure whether everybody really understands what it means, the ticking of the clock. So as I said, I come back with even more resolve. What was positive at Sharm el-Sheikh was, like in Glasgow, this nexus between climate change and biodiversity became more and more and more relevant and more clearer, more spoken of. Last year at Glasgow we had the forest pledges and methane pledges and others, and forest was very much on the, you know, on the picture. This year, of course, with Sharm el-Sheikh it was very much water, but when you speak about water you also speak about drought, and therefore I would like to say there's a third Rio Convention which equally is important, and I happen to be in Abidjan as well. And we make the whole link. And I think this becomes a bit more at the forefront, is better understood, and therefore we were rather happy as EU that we were able to also in Sharm el-Sheikh join up in some very important new partnerships, like the ENAC partnership for nature-based solutions, which aims to accelerate implementation of nature-based solutions on all levels. And then, as I said, we had water at the forefront, so we also were very happy to join and welcome the launch of the what is called AWARE. It's the Action Water Adaptation and Resilience Initiative, and that will champion inclusive cooperation to address water-related challenges and solutions, which are both climate relevant, but also, as I said, for biodiversity. If we have just, proposed our nature-based restoration law, a lot is about water, a lot about revetting certain very important ecosystems like peatlands, grasslands, and so on, which we need in order to have a healthy nature and as carbon sinks, and as buffers to help us not only in climate change but also in extreme weather events, and mitigate and create more resilience when we have disasters, and the disasters ranging from drought to heavy weather, but also to too much water. So all this was very much talked about, and I must say we were very happy to see that. At the same time, it was for us very useful in the run-up to Montreal to also discuss different concepts, because nature-based solutions, yes, we had that agreed, we thought, at UNEA 5, but actually a lot of people would have different views. The ambassador just explained how much you will be doing to restore healthy nature and what you do for 30+30. But some might think, oh, that means you push more burden to the south because we have more nature. And at the same time, we have also nature in Europe, which is extremely important for us to preserve. So we do our part as well, and we already, have put forward a lot of legislation, and that is perhaps our advantage. We can regulate, and regulate easier, be it on soil, be it on forest, be it on nature and nature restoration. So yes, whenever you talk about one concept, there are a lot of different explanations and interpretations. That's why all these summits are important nevertheless, because people have a dialogue and they discuss, what do you mean, what do I mean, and how we can come together. Talking about COP15, what are our ambitions? Let me say that protecting 30% of land and 30% of oceans, and that means also freshwater reserves by 2030 is important, but it is a global ambition, and it's not something that everybody has to deliver on its own, and that's also something to be clarified. And when we talk about protection, it doesn't mean that you cannot use the land. Actually, we have the same discussions here in Europe, but use it sustainably, because we have planetary boundaries. That's the same. We would like to see a rather ambitious numerical target for restoration, but we have, of course, always discussions, what does it mean hold and restore? I mean, for us it means you cannot restore if you not hold, but I'm aware that even in our own member states we have discussions on that, because some have achieved high levels which they need to restore, and that also is quite cumbersome and also costly. Linking biodiversity and climate agendas in general will be a big priority for us, not only by nature-based solutions which bring very multiple benefits, but also avoiding greenwashing. We clearly therefore would like to see also a mechanism, a solid mechanism for the monitoring and review of implementations, harmful subsidies, pesticides, alien species, the list could go on. We know where challenges are, but also we know where the local drivers for biodiversity loss are. So I think Canada and hosting and Montreal will give us really the opportunity for making a real difference, which I think we honestly have to do. The value of nature, when we talk, you will go and speak about, we are getting there. What I would regret is if we only bring it down to finance. In the end, somebody said money you cannot eat. In the end, it's all interlinked, whether you talk about food, about ecosystem services delivered by forest, by other things. You need to look at it holistically and in an integrated fashion. And of course, there is a need for finance. And you know that the President von der Leyen has already announced the doubling of the doubling. But it's not just ODA that will make the difference. And I think that is also something which starts hopefully to kick in, probably also because of the rather too finance-focused discussion in Sharm el-Sheikh. Because if we want to discuss ODA, yes, I think you can really rely on the EU, as you always have been, and other big donors. But you need the other sources of funding. And I think we need to also make sure that there is this domestic contributions as well, because in the end, plastic deforestation, pollution, this is not some global thing that somewhere comes from the sort of industrial countries. It's also a local responsibility, and therefore, perhaps in different ways, but everybody has to chip in order to make it real. And also, if you don't, contribute yourself, you might not, value it as much as it should be. So there is a really a common understanding that we have to forge on the value of nature if we want to really address the triple crisis. And I think this needs trust building. Funding can help trust building, but it should not be enough. It should be really having the common understanding of the challenges. Science is very, very, very clear and still very often ignored. And I can understand if some people get very hopeless in saying, oh my God, why do we disregard science? I would rather say, come with a combative spirit, we now have a chance at COP15 to get everybody on board, and we hopefully can count on many, 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 also from the Global South, who are recognizing that. And we know that we are in very good hands with the Chinese chair, but also with the Canadian host. So let's brace for that and make the best out of it, which really we need to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurie Afai from the Nature Conservancy. I just want to say thank you very much, Ambassador Campbell, Florica Finkoya, for inspiring, thoughtful remarks, the insights you shared with us and your hopes for what's to come. I agree with you, Florica, that this is a fitting venue because we are in the company of dinosaurs, and myself also having just got back from COP27. Unfortunately, there were a few too many dinosaurs around the final negotiating table. I think we can all agree that. But it was thanks to leadership, particularly from the EU, Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans and others, that we did get a deal I think we can work with. We hope we've left the door ajar, at least, if not wide open, to 1.5 degrees. And we look to Canada and Montreal with great hope. Because, of course, if you thought that there was only one climate COP this year, in fact, actually, COP15 is in many ways also a climate COP. And that's, of course, the theme for this evening. And so it's my great pleasure now to welcome more speakers to share with us their thoughts this evening for a panel discussion. We'll keep it quite short, but I know you'll agree with me that this is going to be a really, really insightful discussion. So it's my pleasure to welcome Deputy Ambassador William McFarlane from the UK mission to the EU to take a seat. Also Joe Watson from WCS, welcome. And Camila Polo Flores, Chargé d'Affaires from Colombia, to take a seat. Thank you and welcome. We do have a seat, yes we do. And last but certainly not least, Ines Relay, who is the lead negotiator for the CBD for Belgium. And it's also fallen to me to convey to you all apologies from my colleague, Paula Caballero, the Nature Conservancy's Regional Managing Director for Latin America, who sadly could not travel in the end to be with us today. I know that Paula really wanted to join, and if she were here, she would say, of course, it's important to be building bridges from COP27 to COP15, but also to be building those links to the UN Sustainable Development Goals as we look to a whole society approach. So with that, let's start with you, if I may, Deputy Ambassador McFarlane. You click on the mic.
Hello.
If we reflect on the theme, building bridges from COP27 to COP15, how do you see those bridges being built, and what, in your view, are the mutually reinforcing agendas for both of the COPs?
Thank you very much. Can I echo the comments of earlier speakers and thank the organisations, the inspiring organisations who brought us here this evening. A couple of people have already spoken about the sort of quite humbling environment that we're in the shadow of dinosaurs. I might make another observation in the spirit of your question about the setup we've got, because we've got sort of these twin audiences, much like we've got twin COPs. And I feel in both audiences we're very like-minded. And our job here this evening, but more importantly in Montreal and since Glasgow, is to bring these agendas together. And as Florica said quite powerfully, actually probably a third agenda also. And really, a brief word on Sharm el-Sheikh, if I may, representing the United Kingdom as the outgoing presidency, and a huge support that we've tried to make throughout the year to our Egyptian successors, and congratulations to them. I think the agreement, I very much echo Florica's sentiments. It sustains progress at Glasgow, but we do need to see a greater focus on ambition. It has important references, the package on loss and damage in particular, but there's no reference to CBD15 in the text, and I think we do need to build this greater sense of partnership between the COPs. Actually, these are twin global crises of climate change and the loss and damage to nature and biodiversity, and they're intrinsically linked. And if we fail on one, we will really damage our prospects on the other. My government took a really profound focus on nature and biodiversity in Glasgow, in particular progress on methane and the leader statements on forests. And we were really pleased to bring that conversation back together in Sharm el-Sheikh, and we were very grateful for the support of very many leaders, including the President of the European Commission, in the forestry pledges sustained in Sharm el-Sheikh. But we need to see more progress there. Glasgow saw the first leader-level action, and COP27 is built on that, but there's further progress we can make in COP28. But of course, what we need to see in CBD COP15, as Ailish was talking very powerfully about, is the global framework. We need the Paris moment, actually, for nature and biodiversity, to really bring to life, I think, these twin agendas and their intrinsic links. And whether it's 30 by 30, as has been spoken about already, and I don't want to repeat all those previous points, we need ambitious targets on global biodiversity framework. We need the focus on nature-based solutions that is there in the progress made at Sharm el-Sheikh to be sustained through that agreement. And we want to really build forward from that framework to priority action in bringing these agendas together. Yes, that's been mentioned, and as we focused very significantly on in Glasgow, and right across the climate piece, we need to get the finance right to unlock ambition. But we need the right detail on ambition and the right framework in the first place, as has been made, to direct those resources and reverse the climate change and biodiversity loss that we have already seen. We've had really excellent collaboration with partners in this room, with the European Commission in particular, when we were COP president. And within just a few short weeks, we want to take exactly the spirit of that collaboration to Montreal, together with our partners, and also those right across governments, NGOs, civil society, the whole community that we bring together for these COPs. And so I hope that explains why we feel so strongly about bringing these agendas together, and the work we started in Glasgow but now want to see continued through these other COPs. I feel in these settings it's appropriate to end just with my answer with a quote from probably a Briton far more able to speak on these matters than me, but many of you will know Sir David Attenborough. And he said, "The truth is the natural world is changing." You can accept that. But we are totally dependent on that world. It provides our food, our water, and our air. And it is the most precious thing we have, and we need to defend it. That sentiment is absolutely there in my country, and I know all of the partners here in Brussels, in the EU institutions, but also represented much more broadly in this audience. And so, onwards to Montreal.
Thank you very much. And of course, we do appreciate the UK's leadership at having put nature front and center. for COP15. Colombia has been one of the countries that really has been driving a lot of thought leadership with some really innovative ideas, including the MB Accelerator, which is really, for those of you who don't know it, a real focus on helping countries to already think about how they can implement an ambitious global biodiversity framework. So, Camilla, may I invite you to share with us what are your thoughts for what you think we can get out of COP15, and tell us about the MB Accelerator. What can people in this room today do, perhaps, to help to drive that forward?
Well, thank you very much again for the invitation and to the host for Continental Colombia on this opportunity. I want to just echo 3 or 4 words that the previous speakers mentioned. The sense of urgency is clear that we don't have time, and our President of Colombia said in COP27, humanity is at stake, so we cannot afford losing time. The importance of a holistic approach and is closing the gaps that we imagined before that exist between climate change and biodiversity. It is one world. We cannot take silos approaches. And definitely ambition. And ambition is what has moved Colombia to join others in pursuing for a very clear Global Biodiversity Framework post-2020. We think, and that was mentioned by the environment before, it's not just about finance, it's about closing also the gaps in capacity to implement this global framework. And it doesn't come from above. It means that we at all levels need to implement and need to create capacities to implement our national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and how we work together with the resources we have and how we can channel more resources. And this is what the MD and the Accelerator is about. Is first of all a coalition of high ambition stakeholders who want to catalyze and unlock resources to closing financial and capacity gaps. And this is a matchmaking platform to channel financial resources, non-financial resources, technical assistance, and knowledge. So we all have our own means and find our own ways to fulfill our national plans, but of course the Global Biodiversity Framework. It's important to make clear that it's about money, but this is not only money. It's not a new trust fund, and I want to highlight that. It's rather a mechanism to align financial flows. And here again comes the holistic approach. We need to be smart in using the resources we have under the CBD, but also the climate change, the SDGs, etc. We have to be smarter because, again, we don't have time. So with this mechanism, we want also to ease the burden and reduce the transaction cost for all parties when looking and accessing resources. And this is the nature of a matchmaking platform. Identify financial needs, identify donor sources, financial sources, and how we can make them work together. There are 4 mutually reinforcing and interrelated goals embedded in this idea, in this initiative for the MPSAP as accelerator. One is very much related to creating capacity, which is support the preparation, implementation, and review of backbone projects. It's important that all CBD parties, especially developing countries, create capacity to identify national priorities, align them also, again, with the climate change, with the SDGs, and so on, create established project pipelines, and create synergies. A second objective, a goal, is enable finance access from different sources. This also is related to somehow the national capacity, how we can make working together finance ministries and environmental ministries, so we can have the environment in like a mainstreaming in all actions, public and private. So when we talk about enable finance, we are talking, of course, the national budget, but it's important to also involve private sector and other stakeholders. We need to find innovative ways of funding our activities. We need to find ways to leverage other modalities of cooperation, not only North-South, but also South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, and this platform will allow for that. A third goal is align the financial flows and catalyze biodiversity mainstreaming that I was mentioning before, especially how to see environment and biodiversity as part of the productive activities in each country. And last, provide knowledge management to enhance implementation. And I'm very happy to join this initiative here with all of you. So far we have 37 partners, some of them here. 5 of them, of those partners from Europe, but we would like to see more of Europe there because we need that. We need the support for this initiative. It's not only for developing countries. I think all can benefit of it. How I envisage having more European partners or more partners, because it's not only countries, it's also organizations, private sector, civil society, etc., is we need political support. By providing political support, we are not only, of course, promoting this initiative, but we're also elevating the discussion and prioritizing and putting on the spot what are the key needs that we have in many developing countries. For a supporter, for a member of this initiative, this accelerator, you will champion also the effort for a more ambitious CBD framework. And again, we need ambition, and we cannot afford reducing that ambition. And of course, how we can, all of us can contribute, providing technical assistance and support capacity building, financial support, or offering knowledge tools. Again, this is not only about finance, it's about knowledge, sharing experiences, sharing expertise, channel financial resources, and making a smarter use of what we have.
Thank you, Camilla. Thank you, and thank you to Colombia for driving that co-leadership. We need ambition, I heard you say. Ines, as a lead CBD negotiator, you're really there at the coalface, you're in the thick of it, you're one of the experts in this room, if I may say, on everything to do with COP15. May I ask, what are your hopes and ambitions as we look to Montreal?
Yes, thank you, and also allow me to just first thank the organizers and everybody for being here, for showing the importance to the issue that it deserves. And I'm also very happy that there's a connection being made between Climate COP and the CB COP. 4 years ago, that wasn't as obvious as it is now. As biodiversity experts, we've been jumping up and down for years, and we're always considered like, this is a detail. We deal with serious issues here, we deal with climate. We've got biodiversity, leave it to the people dealing with parks. And that has to in a turn for the better. So I'm very grateful to the UK for the Glasgow COP, and also for all those that really understand how these crises are interconnected. You can't disconnect them. I mean, even if you stop climate change, if you destroy the living environment, fine, we won't get flooded, we'll starve. I mean, it's not solving anything. So in that context, it's also very good to see that people are now taking the COP15 and the biodiversity issues more serious. And what we're hoping for is for having a landmark decision, as was said, to have a Paris-like moment. But we all know that it is going to be a huge challenge. And it's going to be important not to take the low-hanging fruit alone. Because, of course, Belgium is part of the High Emission Coalition, and also the global issues, and we're very much behind the 30 by 30. But we all know that IPBES identified that the biggest reason why we didn't reach HE targets was not because we didn't protect the areas that need protection. It's because we weren't able to integrate the drivers. It's the mainstreaming issue. It's the other 70% that is going to require at least as much attention. So our hopes and expectations very much that we need to have the 30 by 30. That's a bare minimum. But that shouldn't be a blind card to then destroy the rest of the 70%. And that is something that needs to be captured in ambition, in the goals and the targets. But it also have to find its way into the political narrative, because coming out of Montreal, saying, well, we did wonderful, we've got the 30 by 30, it's actually it's not going to be a good thing. because it risks damaging the integrity of the Biodiversity Convention and reduce it to a conservation convention. And I think, I'm not sure everybody here is aware of that, but the CBD is very much a sustainable development convention. It's about conservation, sustainable use, and excellent manufacturing of genetic resources. No, but the point is that the focus is very much, I mean, we reached, the only target we actually reached was target 11, was on protected areas. So for now, we're going to focus only on that one, and I'm afraid that for now, people are still looking at the entire spectrum. But when the heat is going to build up in Montreal, it's going to be very important that political leaders don't fold and don't just take the easy win and run with it. Because that is going to damage the relevance of biodiversity. We've been fighting so hard to get biodiversity into agriculture, fisheries, infrastructure, everywhere. If we now show that the outcome is going to be about protected areas, we're going to lose all credibility. So our expectation is actually that through the other goals and targets, we'll be able to show why and how to protect the 70%. Because that's crucial if you want to keep biodiversity relevant for sustainable development. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows here the wedding cake presentation of the SDGs. You take away the lower layer, it's biodiversity and climate change, and all the SDGs come down. But of course, if you now focus the next 10 years on only financing and protecting protected areas, it's really going to make that narrative very different. And the financing needs to reflect that. So there also I very much appreciate the comments that we said it's not just about ODA, it's getting the entire civil society involved in this. So that's what we're hoping to be able to bring, so that we can come out of Montreal with a strong message that not only makes concrete decisions on how to protect what we still have, but also sets us really on a path that we get the entire society to work with us to change this around.
Yes, thank you. We agree. It is that whole society approach, really, that we need to see coming out of Montreal. So certainly, last but not least, Joe, why, in your view, as a voice, a leading voice of civil society, is the COP15 so crucial? And how can civil society work with partner governments and the organisations represented in the room today to help drive the implementation both of biodiversity and climate?
Well, I realise I'm the last person between you and a glass of wine, so I will just again try not to repeat anything, because it's been a fantastic set of comments, and I think my number one job is not to just repeat. But I would like to thank our hosts in this fantastic location. It's a wonderful place to host us. I want to say also I had the chance to be a little less diplomatic than some of my colleagues here today, because I'm not a diplomat. And so I would like to point out, I think that we should actually look towards Montreal as possibly helping us save some of the lost face coming out of Sharm el-Sheikh, because I think we failed as a community in Sharm el-Sheikh. I think we fundamentally, for the final outcome, to not mention fossil fuels, to not mention nature-based solutions, how on earth can that possibly be seen as anything but a failure, building on the strong platform I believe we had coming out of Glasgow? So let's put that aside, but I think that I'm a little less positive about what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, having been there myself and being part of it. Saying that, I think we should be absolutely bullish about our prospects in going to Montreal. I think that we should feel that we haven't done enough globally, and that, as others have mentioned now, that a strong commitments coming out of Montreal is going to have possibly far greater impacts on climate change through nature than some of the commitments coming out of Sharm el-Sheikh. And I think we can still do a huge amount towards our collective goals, our CBD achievements, but more broadly the SDGs, if we, again, are ambitious enough to really follow through. And I think there's a few reasons to be slightly optimistic, more optimistic than I was a while ago. I think we have a set of leaders out there who are now talking about this, who, many of you aren't old enough like me to remember when heads of state wouldn't have ever talked about nature, would never have talked about these subjects. Let's not forget that actually we now have, and I listened to a number of heads of state talking about it. Sure, it's only talk, but they are following up now. It was remarkable also how many countries And I had to give credit specifically to Colombia after not just a single president, but multiple presidents who were making the same commitment. Because why? It's in the culture, it's in the society, it's in the civil service. It's not just Costa Rica anymore out there. There are countries across the world, whether it be Gabon and Rwanda, whether it be Indonesia now, making some serious commitments now into the environment sector. That is coming from the countries that are not only retain most of the world's biodiversity and nature, but actually have the greatest contribution to climate change, and also are suffering the most as a result of our failed collective response to biodiversity and climate change. Finally, to leave on a practical note, we do have things that we can actually do, apart from just general commitments. People often ask me, what's the connection between biodiversity and climate change, and what can we do? Well, we have something. We have something. We are seeing forests burn, whether in California and in the Amazon, in Australia and Europe even, where damaged systems are collapsing more readily due to climate change. They're more vulnerable to climate change. Intact systems, ecologically intact systems, are more resilient. Coral reefs are more resilient. Forests are more resilient if they are intact. We have an index out there. We can come together as a community and develop the equivalent of the Global Poverty Index for nature. That would say how intact any one place in the world, and again, to Ines's point, inside a protected area, outside a protected area, in a European city, in the Amazon basin, that can help us as a metric of where we are. We need to give the world a robust, simple, composite metric that we can follow, that governments can get behind. When the Aichi targets were set, what did we follow? 10 and 15%. Why? It was the only time we gave them numbers, and we gave them metrics. There were a whole lot of values in the Aichi targets, which we completely ignored. So let's get together in Montreal. I think that the term ecological integrity is going to be in the framework. It's in there, it's not bracketed at the moment. So let's make sure we don't lose that language. It's a common term. We can build a metric around this that can work with our partners from civil society and governments around, and to be able to measure the quality of nature and how it's responding. High quality nature will be our greatest delivery in our fight against climate change. A number of you around that. I'd just like to say thank you as I finish to a number of the nations also. It wasn't just Colombia, to hear the voices at the meeting of indigenous and local communities, of also southern partners who are increasingly, I think, becoming emboldened about how angry they are at how the world is failing them. And I would just say that if we can listen more to those voices, respond to that in Montreal, I think we could pick up on, frankly, the failures of Sharm el-Sheikh and really people remember Montreal for the meeting we made this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So if I hear you correctly, let's keep the dinosaurs in the museums and unleash all the ambition in the world for COP15 in Montreal. So thank you to everybody, all the speakers this evening. I should have said earlier, sadly we have to keep it short, but we will now welcome you to have a drink and you can continue hopefully the discussions with some of them who are able to hopefully stay with us and take forward the networking. Thanks again to all of you and good luck to those of you who will be heading to Montreal. Thank you.